Le azioni dell'Iran hanno sconvolto il mondo civile.
Via, via, via!
Eliminate tutto! La nostra ambasciata è stata presa e più di 60 cittadini americani continuano a essere tenuti in ostaggio.
Se vogliamo andare, dobbiamo andare ora.
Che è successo?
6 degli ostaggi sono usciti da una porta sul retro.
E dove sono?
A casa dell'ambasciatore canadese.
Le guardie della rivoluzione vanno porta a porta. Se quella gente muore, muore male.
La Casa Bianca?
Li vuole liberi tutti e 6.
Penseremmo di usare delle biciclette.
Gli consegniamo le 6 bici e gli forniamo delle mappe.
O se no, speditegli le rotelline e aspettateli al confine col Gatorade.
Ci vorrà un miracolo per tirarli fuori.
Nicoletto, che ti guardi?
Ho avuto un'idea. Sono una troupe canadese di un film di fantascienza. Io volo a Teheran e ce ne torniamo come se fossimo una troupe. Devi aiutarmi a fare un falso film.
Cioè vuoi venire a Hollywood a spacciarti per qualcuno senza essere nessuno?
Sì.
Sarai a tuo agio. Ti serve un copione.
Argo. Fantascienza avventurosa. Luna, Marte, deserto. Ci serve una location esotica.
Ti serve un produttore.
Se io faccio un falso film, sarà un falso successo.
Non avete una migliore cattiva idea? Questa è la migliore cattiva idea che abbiamo, signore. Di gran lunga. Hai 72 ore per tirarli fuori.
Avete visite?
Ha mai liberato nessuno in questo modo?
No.
Ci chiede di affidarle le nostre vite.
È il mio lavoro. E non ho mai abbandonato nessuno.
Sanno chi sono e che si nascondono.
È finita, Tony.
Se restano qui, saranno catturati. Difficilmente vivi. Siamo responsabili di questa gente. Io sono responsabile.
Davvero pensa che la sua storiella farà qualche differenza con un'arma alla testa?
Penso che la mia storiella sia l'unica cosa tra voi e un'arma alla testa.
Allora, buongiorno a tutti. Benvenuti alla conferenza stampa di Argo, il nuovo film di Ben Affleck, che come sapete uscirà in Italia l'8 di novembre. Una domanda fatidica sulle copie, naturalmente siamo ancora lontani dall'uscita, però ragionando con Nicola Meccanico per ora sono almeno 300, poi però come sapete mancano ancora moltissimi giorni. Come dicevo prima abbiamo... Ok. Quindi do subito a voi, c'è Bruna Camarano che è laggiù che ci aiuta, c'è Oscar Kosovic che dovrebbe cominciare la nostra conversazione. Sta arrivando?
Una ricostruzione quasi maniacale dal punto di vista visivo di come è successo. La domanda che mi pongo è se dal punto di vista narrativo quante libertà invece si è preso per rendere più action il film alla fine, cioè quanta libertà c'è nella storia.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, should we use don't use any of these? Just use this, okay. You know, as a filmmaker, working on a true story, you have two responsibilities. One is to make the best film you can, engage the audience, allow them to empathize with the characters, you know, permit them to feel everything that they should feel to be invested in the story. The second responsibility, equally important, is to adhere to the fundamental truth of the story itself as it happened in history. So, in the course of trying to maintain that balance, we kept the facts, the central facts, exactly as they took place, but for example, I added a bit more tension in the third act so that the movie didn't sort of fall flat at the end, and you guys didn't all boo me when I came in here. And I also introduced a few other elements. Most of the storytelling sins are sins of omission, because it could have been a 10-hour miniseries with all the things that people did to support this mission. You know, I was forced to make choices about what to use and what not to use, so there are people who feel like, oh, you know, there's this whole wonderful part that's omitted from the movie, and that was hard because there was a lot of stuff.
Valerio, prego.
Buongiorno, innanzitutto complimenti perché è una delle poche persone che è riuscito a stupirmi nel mondo di Hollywood. Volevo sapere, per la scelta del cast, come ha proceduto? Cioè è stato deciso più visivamente oppure proprio scelti per le loro capacità? Perché sono molti vengono dalla TV.
Yes, you're exactly right to point out that many of them come from television. That's a function of the fact that most of the good drama that's being done now in Los Angeles is on television. You know, adult drama has really shifted into cable channels. So you have Mad Men and Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones and The Killing and on and on and on. And it's much more difficult to make the economics work on making a drama for theatrical release. So, you know, Damages, for example, is a place I drew a lot of actors from. But there was just, and obviously Breaking Bad and other places, not deliberately out of wanting to work from that genre, from that medium, but because that's where talented people were working. In terms of casting by visuals, I did have posters up in my office of all the real people and the way they looked. I didn't make that an exclusive consideration, but when an actor came in and did look just like the person, that was kind of thrilling. And strangely enough, I probably would have cast him anyway. But John Goodman looks exactly like the guy that he played in the movie, so that always tickled me myself.
Fine alla presidenza Carter e poi chiaramente ha dato via in qualche maniera all'era di Ronald Reagan. È un modo per riabilitare in qualche maniera lo sforzo di un presidente democratico in quegli anni? E poi una domanda un po' più banale: è la prova che il cinema possa non solo cambiare il mondo ma anche salvare la vita nel vero senso del termine? Grazie.
It's true that I'm not a political expert or pundit, but I can tell you from my research and observation that the hostage crisis did irreparable damage to the Carter administration. Although Ronald Reagan turned out to be a much stronger politician than anyone in the Carter administration imagined, they had sort of dismissed him as an airhead and a dilettante and an actor, you can imagine. And then he turned out to be quite potent as a politician. So maybe he would have won anyway, but that didn't help him at all. I wanted to make a movie that wasn't political per se, that didn't instruct the audience that they ought to feel one way or another. I wanted to make a movie that couldn't be exploited for people who had, one or another takes, for example, on the situation in Iran. I wanted to make a movie that was expressly about a story that happened some 30 years ago. And I used the Carter voiceover at the end because the story was so outlandish. I really wanted to cement in the audience's mind as they're walking out of the theater, this really took place. What you just saw is a real story. I didn't want to make it a referendum on the Carter presidency. Although I think, one of the other reasons why I used what he said is I think it's rather elegant. It points to a central theme in the movie, which is about resolving problems peacefully and with integrity. I think the goal of the cinema is not necessarily to save people. It's to me, it's an art form, and people express themselves, hopefully artfully, through this medium. And I think that can do a lot of things that are unexpected, move people. Great art is transformative, rare, but it's very special. I think, in terms of this movie, my hopes for it were frankly just to sort of pay tribute to the people who make sacrifices for their country by leaving behind their family and that sort of thing. And at a deeper level is to push folks toward an examination of some of the underlying issues, questions raised without being didactic and telling people what they should think.
La valenza politica, anche se ha già detto qualcosa sulla politica, che questo film può avere oggi durante la primavera araba e comunque le ribellioni o rivolte, come le vogliamo chiamare, in quella zona. Grazie.
I would say that the genesis of this project for me was a lot of love of cinema, in the sense that it started with a screenplay that I read and I was moved by and astonished by, and that I wanted to get involved with just purely as an artist, as a director and as an actor and so on. However, I also love my country, and in a very pragmatic way, you know, I'm not a jingoist, but I do recognize that there are a lot of sacrifices people make and people who work very hard, and I respected that, and I wanted to pay homage to those people, probably in the broadest possible sense. You know, Renoir is one of my favorite filmmakers, and many of the themes present in his movies are about the fundamental decency and interconnectedness in some ways of mankind. And that's a theme that I always try to keep present, which naturally includes a kind of love for country, but also transcends it in a way, because it reaches beyond national borders. And in terms of the political issue, I anticipated some things, I didn't anticipate others. You know, it's always funny because you release a movie quite a bit later than the genesis of when you start thinking about it. So several years ago, when I started thinking about making the movie, I imagined that there would be some similarities that people would draw, for example, between a revolution in the Arab world, the unintended consequences of supporting pro-Western dictators, and sort of turning a blind eye to corruption or oppression or that sort of thing, because that's what was happening at the time, and you know, Mubarak in Egypt and elsewhere, and they were dealing with, everyone was dealing with the consequences of the ensuing, you know, kind of quasi-revolution there. And I knew that, you know, obviously the Green Revolution, you know, loomed over this. The Green Revolution, the kind of interesting irony of it was that they co-opted a lot of the features of the Islamic revolution to make it a sort of more politically palatable revolution, but it was in fact a revolution against Khamenei's regime and Ahmadinejad in that election, and in particular the presidential election, which is viewed to be fraudulent. I think that I was very surprised. I wasn't surprised, but I was saddened and moved by the tragedy in Benghazi and by what happened in Cairo, and that was not something that I could anticipate, but it did make me glad that one of the features of the movie was about paying tribute to the very kinds of people who lost their lives there, and that it was saddening because it sort of to see history repeat itself so plainly from the research footage that I looked at from 30 years ago to what's on the television screens today. It's quite saddening, and it asks, you know, have we not come very far at all? Have we not figured out the answers to some of these problems, you know? And I don't have the answers to those questions, but it definitely raised them in my mind when that stuff was happening.
Se pensa di continuare ancora come regista, e poi il fatto che come produttore c'è anche George Clooney, che anche lui fa dei film politici, se in qualche maniera avete discusso, lei ha dato una mano, qualche consiglio, grazie.
Thank you very much for saying that. I keep getting better as a filmmaker. I continue to see, you know, flaw after flaw, so it's nice to hear that, definitely. You know, it's not an easy thing to, you just ask me how long, you know, why did it take me so long to direct. You know, it's not an easy thing to just assume this role, you know, to have the confidence to do it, to find the right material. It was a long period of my life where I was also chasing after sort of, you know, it's funny being an actor, you struggle and you struggle and you struggle and you audition and you audition, and it's all about this kind of rabid chase after opportunities, and then if you're very lucky, you get them, and then you get one after another, and so it's like a starving man who finally reaches a dinner table full of food. You know, you just want to eat as much as you can. So it took me a minute to sort of calm down and also pursue this other thing that I very deeply wanted to do. If I can't read the notes, what's the point? You know what I mean? I'll skip to George. George Clooney is a producer on the movie and also a resident of your great country. And a very great guy. And one of the things that is very helpful about having both George and Grant Heslop, who's his partner, as producers, is that you have filmmakers who are producers. These are both guys who have not just made films, but made very, very good films. And so, you know, you really feel protected, and you have a sense that that they have your best interest at heart and that they're looking out for you from the vantage point of understanding what you might be going through, rather than just saying you got to hurry up, you're over budget, that kind of thing. George does make political films, or I guess I don't even know if he would define them as political films. I guess you'd have to ask him. He has made films that have been political. I guess Ides of March is definitely a political film. And he's very smart about it. He's extremely smart about Hollywood. He's extremely smart, I think, about politics. Even if one doesn't agree with his positions, I think one has to accept that he's quite a sharp guy about this stuff. And yeah, it's been a pleasure just working with him and absorbing things from him and having conversations with him and getting to enjoy his worldview. If any of you are thinking about working with George, I highly recommend it.
Quando vuoi, prego.
Sì. Allora, volevo invece passare all'aspetto più di commedia del film. Quando lei fa descrivere Hollywood da questi due divertentissimi personaggi, appunto tra cui il giocatore Chandler, praticamente la Hollywood che loro descrivono è una sorta di manica di cialtroni che mentono bugiardi, che mentono a tutti, ed è molto divertente, ma mi chiedo, è veramente così? Cioè, questa è una sua opinione? Cioè, parliamone un attimo.
I don't want to come to this press conference and say that Hollywood is full of only lazy people who lie because it makes it very hard for me to go home. But I do think, those words are in the mouth of a character who's kind of a wonderfly hyperbolic, overstating guy. So he's kind of being funny when he says that. But like all humor, or in all humor, there's an undercurrent of truth. Hollywood is a place where everybody's trying to get ahead all the time and trying to get advantage, and oftentimes, like Washington, they're always putting spin on things. Movies never bomb; they underperform. It's just a way of a product, I think, of the competition there, and the fact that there's so many people that want to be part of it, and that people are sort of artistic, so that they're used to taking artistic liberties. But it is actually a place where I have many really good friends and who don't lie to people every day. So I wouldn't say it's all really like that entirely. But I did like that that's Alan Arkin's character's take on Hollywood. I thought it was quite fitting. And John Goodman's character also has a similar sort of cynicism about Hollywood. And what I like about him is that he represents something that you really don't see in movies, particularly in Hollywood satire, is the sort of blue-collar side of Hollywood. And most people who work there, are kind of metaphorically carrying their lunch to work. They're electricians, or they're grips, or they're makeup artists, or they're, they're people that don't get paid a lot of money and that often go to work and have to listen to, lectured by pompous directors.
Prego.
Buongiorno, intanto anch'io mi sciolgo nei complimenti per il film, basta appena aspettare 3 anni. Allora, una curiosità un po' divertente: se per caso in fase di pre-produzione, quando avete deciso le location, avete girato in Turchia, non ha avuto per caso qualche proposta strana di qualcuno che vi ha detto magari andiamo direttamente in Iran a girare qualche esterno? E poi si è incontrato Antonio Mendez, primo dopo il film, comunque se lui ha visto il film, che cosa le ha raccontato, se gli è piaciuto oppure no?
Yeah, we went to Turkey, and I would have loved to have filmed in Iran, but politically that wasn't practical. It wasn't even practical for me to visit that country to do research, which really bothered me because as a director, it just feels wrong to be making a film about a country that you haven't even visited. I mean, it's kind of an astonishingly bad approach just on the surface. But I tried to make up for it by doing as much research as I possibly could. Fortunately, there's photographs and video and that sort of thing, and also incorporating a lot of Iranians into our production, into our research process, including some wonderful Iranian filmmakers. And that was really educational for me. And then I felt like, okay, I understand this place a little better. I didn't have any outrageous proposals from people from Turkey. Actually, the people in Turkey, the thing that was kind of heartbreaking is I went to Turkey in part because I hoped to have some Iranians who spoke Farsi, because that kind of authenticity I needed, and I was planning on having Farsi and improvising in Farsi and not having subtitles and that sort of thing. And I mean, virtually nobody who spoke Farsi and was from Iran was willing to be in the movie because they were afraid that by being an American movie, they would open their family up to reprisals. And that really brought home the seriousness of the subject matter to me. That that was not fiction. That was people who were living under a sort of, I don't know what you'd say, Stalinist kind of regime back in Iran, and having to deal with how difficult that was. I did meet Tony Mendez. Tony Mendez was a part of the writing process, the development process. It was based on a chapter in his book, as well as an article. Tony was extremely forthcoming. He also helped us with the CIA and made introductions, and he made it possible for us to film with the CIA. He's a lovely, kind, very quiet man, and he had a cameo in the movie at the airport. Him and his entire family and everyone he knows marches by me going into the airport, and he came to the premiere, and he was very. He either liked the movie or he's very polite, but he it was nice to hear kind of words.
Sono stata preceduta nella domanda su Hollywood, quindi volevo essere un po' più specifica. Nel film, a proposito di Hollywood, c'è una frase che mi dice: anche un macaco può imparare a fare il regista. Allora volevo sapere se secondo lei a Hollywood ci sono molti macachi e poi volevo anche capire in base a cosa sceglie di cimentarsi nella regia con un film, cioè c'è un genere che predilige oppure uno che pensa che non si cimenterà mai? Grazie.
Yes, I suppose there are a few rhesus monkeys running around Hollywood. I mean, I may be one of them. If you were a rhesus monkey, you probably wouldn't even know it. The thing about that scene that I find quite charming is, again, the John Goodman sort of way that he kind of rolls his eyes at his bosses. The way that everybody has a boss who they maybe not like. And he gives us this sense that, he thinks there's a little bit of absurdity in the sort of the environment that's going on there, and in some of the directors that he has to work with. I think, it's interesting because it's hard to know what kind of, it's hard to know if a movie's going to work based on the environment of the set or the way the person comes across. So sometimes it can seem like you're working with a director and you go like, this is our fearless leader, and then the movie turns out well. So that's sort of, I think, what that's touching on. Is there a genre that I would, no, I don't look for genres in particular. I look for stories and characters and things that kind of interest me and themes that are resonant with me. I don't know if there's a genre I wouldn't do. I think I would leave myself open to any genre, really, if the story was good and I was working with talented people. Maybe not some extreme genres or something, but for the most part, it's just about story. The suspenseful aspect of the movie, I think, chiefly is, and as far as it's successful, attributable to the acting. You have these actors, and you watch them, and if you're living realistically through them and empathizing with them, when they're in a position where their life seems to be in danger, it will bring up your heart rate. I mean, as an actor, this is something that I really believe, and some people disagree with me, but I think if you look, for example, at The French Connection, which is a famous driving race movie, and this was something that I thought about a lot for the town. It is suspenseful and it is tense, but I think the reason that it's so suspenseful and that it really hooks you in is because of Hackman pounding on the steering wheel, and you're with him, and connected to him, and that's what roots you in that car. And yeah, it's cool to see it going around the, subway girders and stuff, but to me, again, it's about sort of making sure that the acting is believable, the environment is believable, and if you create that sort of realistic environment, you have to do a lot less, kind of math and geometry in terms of kind of constructing the ABCs of the suspense. Good writing, good acting, and then I think as a director sometimes it's counterintuitive, but the smartest thing to do is to just get out of the way, to not try to gild the lily, to embellish it, to add some low tracking shot that's gonna that subconsciously tells the audience, oh, I see, this is a movie. This is a director showing me something slick. This isn't real life. This is a guy showing me that he got a bungee cam for the day, or they shot with the Russian arm, or this stuff that, you know, while very sexy and great, and there are some masters at doing it, my personal feeling is that at times that can actually trigger a sort of a distance in the audience, where subconsciously they get these cues that says, I'm not looking at something realistic because the camera's in a place that no normal, real observer could actually be.
Grazie.
Maybe. I'm going to tell him that I got that question. It's the one thing I'm going to tell him. Because I know Christian Bale is right now walking a marathon somewhere. Other filmmakers. What was the other first part of the question?
When you're back on set.
Oh, yes. I get distracted by the mouth thing. You know, it's really, in a way, it's good, and in a way it's bad. When I work with other filmmakers like Terry, who are real masters and have this great history, you know, it affords me an opportunity to learn that I didn't really have before I had the context that I do now. In other words, I can more easily imagine what that director might be going through, might be struggling with, might be trying to do, and so when I see the solutions that they find, you know, I'm more able to digest those and steal them. With directors that, you know, I don't connect with, it is frustrating because, you know, naturally you know, and I've had directors that I've gone back and forth with in my career, but you know, ironically, after having directed myself, I don't argue with directors anymore. I don't fight directors because I understand that it's the director's medium, and that while I may have a certain idea about a scene and they may have a different idea about a scene, it's not really my idea that matters. It's the director's take, and that you're smartest to just invest yourself in that, the direction of that boat, instead of taking your boat and trying to go somewhere else, because the movie's going this way, you know, so you're just going to be lost at sea. I'm not going to play with that metaphor anymore, but you know, it's
Io ringrazio moltissimo Ben Affleck, ringrazio